Once presidents leave office, they immediately receive generous taxpayer-funded benefits to run their post-presidency offices. Demian Brady is Vice President of Research at the National Taxpayers Union Foundation. He joins us now with details. Demian, welcome to American Radio Journal. Demian, American taxpayers continue to subsidize or pay for the operational costs of presidents once they leave the Oval Office. Can you give us a bit of an overview as to exactly what it is that we, the taxpayers, provide?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and a lot of people don't know about this perk that former presidents get when they're done serving in the White House, and history behind it is very interesting. It goes back to Harry Truman. When he left the White House, he was pleading poverty, telling everybody in Washington, D.C. that he was just down on his luck financially. He needed some help. He could not deal with all the mail requests he was getting for speeches and correspondence, things like that. So this Former Presidents Act was enacted to provide offices for former presidents. So this perk includes funding for an office space. It could be located anywhere in the country. There's no limit on the size of it. You get staff, funding for equipment, shipping, stamps, things like that. And it turned out after he passed away, after his widow passed away, and the family papers became more available, analysts went through that, and it turns out he had a significant amount of wealth, worth more than $70 million in today's dollars. So this whole perk was established basically on a fraudulent premise that he was poor, but it's completely obsolete in the modern era. You know, Truman was very wealthy. In the modern era, all the former presidents, extremely wealthy, have lots of opportunities to make money in the private sector. But this perk lives on, and all told, we're spending about $5 million a year on average to provide for the office space and staff and all the perks that go along with that. And that includes a generous pension that they get as well.
Are there any limits to this spending, Demian, or is it up to the former presidents themselves to determine, for example, how much they're going to spend on office space and other, as you put it, perks of the office?
Yeah, they can locate it anywhere in the country that they want. There's really no limit on the amount of rent that taxpayers would be providing for this. So they tend to be located in high rent areas, so there's no limit on that. And oftentimes, too, the presidents will also locate their office of the former president nearby where they have a foundation. So it's unclear what sort of commingling is going on. Now, there is a limit on the pension that is set at the annual salary for a cabinet secretary, and that gets adjusted every year.
Taking a look back in history, you say all this started with Harry Truman. So, for example, Ulysses S. Grant, he left office. He was virtually impoverished when he did. He didn't get such support when he left?
No, nothing like this was established until the late 1950s. You know, I was just reading a book about George Washington, and after he left the White House, and lots of stuff going on in the history of the Republic at the time. Everyone wanted his advice and counsel, so he had visitors pretty much every day that he had to entertain and feed and take care of, in addition to dispensing knowledge to them. I think he had some family members help him out with some expenses like that, but nothing was provided from the federal government until the 1950s. You know, and one question about this is, a lot of it is dealing with correspondence that they get, helping them gather their papers so they can write their memoir. And these are all ways that the former presidents can go out and earn money. They can get paid a couple $100,000 for any speech that they give. They get significant bonuses, signing deals for the memoirs that they publish. So, you know, it's really time to revisit this perk and save taxpayers some money.
I would assume, Demian, that these funds are in addition to the fact that former presidents rightfully receive Secret Service protection, which I'm assuming is a pretty penny to cover that as well.
Correct. And the $5 million that I noted excludes any Secret Service protection costs. That's all unknown to the public. So that help protect the secrecy of those operations. Any reform, there has been some reforms introduced in Congress, but not touching the Secret Service protection at all.
Modern presidents, of course, tend to have a library. A number of them are, in fact, buried or interred at their library. Harry Truman, as you mentioned, he is one of them. Actually had an opportunity to visit the Truman Library and gravesite here a few weeks ago. Very impressive facility. Do any of these dollars help subsidize those operations, or are they completely separate?
That's a separate deal run by the National Archives. So there's some money provided for the upkeep of the presidential libraries if they are part of the presidential library system that the archives manages. So, there's been a lot of news lately about the Obama Center in Chicago, and it often gets referred to as a library. But technically, his is not a presidential library. At first it was going to be. So after he left the White House, National Archives took all of his papers, shipped them to Chicago, and had them stored in a warehouse. But then he decided he was going to do something different and not house any of his documents at the library. So after the pandemic cleared up, all those documents were eventually transferred back to a National Archives facility outside of Washington, D.C. So things like that going forward can save taxpayers money, because then we're not spending extra money to keep the library up to shape for maintenance issues and all the architectural standards that go into making sure that documents are properly preserved within.
Vice presidents, when they leave office, do they receive any sort of compensation for maintaining their offices in their post-vice presidency?
They don't get any perks like that at all. Now, depending on how long they served in Congress, they can get their congressional pension. So, President Biden is a very interesting example of this because he gets the presidential pension, which is, as I said, is equal to the cabinet secretary's salary, which is about $250,000. And then he also served 44 years in the Senate, and that includes 8 years as vice president, which is an office of the Senate. So he gets a dual pension, which is very unique. So combined, he's making, if he maximized his pension while he was in the Senate and as vice president, he can get a pension worth up to $417,000 a year, which is more than the president collects in his annual salary.
We have been talking with Demian Brady, who is Vice President of Research at the National Taxpayer Union Foundation. Demian, tell us a little bit about NTU, and also you have written on this subject. Where can folks find that?
Yeah, NTU Foundation is the research arm for the National Taxpayers Union. I work a lot on budget transparency, making sure that lawmakers and taxpayers have reliable cost estimates from the Congressional Budget Office so we can make sound decisions to rein in the out-of-control spending. And you can find our work at ntu.org.
Demian Brady of the National Taxpayer Union Foundation. Demian, thank you for taking time to be with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Scott.